Hey there, I'm Damon Owens. Today, with a special message just for our men. I want to talk about you men and me, what we have to offer the world, and why it is so important. You know, it's hard to talk these days specifically about gender roles because of the debate, the confusion, even the contention around even what gender is now. But listen, we need to step back and recognize that God created us male and female. And there's a truth about that transcends any cultural opinion. So when we talk about this irreplaceable role, this beautiful role that you play as a man, that I'm called to as a man, it's all within the realm of what God created in what we call communion. Everything serves communion. And meaning that we talk about the differences, particularly of men and women, of male and female. But those differences are not meant to be mere differences from, but they're meant to be differences for. We're speaking about vocation and purpose and meaning. And the two great halves of humanity that God created, male and female, from the beginning, part of bringing his image and likeness into the visible world, was about the capacity to create communion. To the truth of who God is, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, now made visible in all of creation. Dr. Peter Kreeft talks about the cosmological reality of masculine and feminine. It's in the stars, it's in the sun and the moon, it's in the light and the dark, it's in all these things, even the yin and the yang, right, in other philosophies and religions. It's the recognition that the masculine and feminine are these two great parts of what makes communion. And in the Christian ethos, in the Catholic sensibility, God created us male and female so that communion can not just be an idea that we experience from the outside, but it becomes an experience of our very being. So there's an important role of masculine made flesh in man for that communion. There's an important reality of femininity made fleshed in female so that the man and woman, the male and female, can create and experience what it is to love as communion. So what's particular about your gift of masculinity, your gift as a man, and what God is asking of you? Well, what are these two parts? In the cosmology, in the big place, it's about entrusting ourselves and willing the good. And that willing the good, of that initiative self-gift, is the I am yours. It is what we call right from God the Father, that everything comes from God the Father. The Son receives and trusts all that the Father wills for him, and he loves the Father back. He gives himself back. And we can apply this in so many ways in the scriptures and what Christ revealed about himself. But for our sake, this initiative, willing the good, and this entrustment to the other is what makes this communion of man and woman, of what makes marriage, of what makes love. So the willing of the good and the initiative doesn't mean that only men will the good and that only women are in entrustment, right? That there's always this both and. But there is something symbolic. There is something significant. There is something distinctive that God did make in this enfleshment of men and you and me that we're responsible for. Let's call it this, that we're called to will the good with an entrustment. That it's not just some random gift, but we will what is good. It means we have to know what's good. We have to embrace and experience that good, and then we have to will it. It's an actual act. It's the act of the will. But we do that with an entrustment that it can be received by the feminine, by the female, right? By all, for sure. But in this gift and relationship, we're talking about the unique role of men in willing good with entrustment. And what does that look like in a human sense? It's about leadership. It's about being initiators in good, hard things. It's about the virtues, right? Whether they're theological, of faith, and of hope, and of love, and of being the ones that make that visible, that we're mediators, that we receive from God, and that we take on this role of mediation to bring into the visible reality of the world that's invisible in God. That's a masculine vocation, to seek the good, to do whatever it takes to embrace the good and experience it, and then to pass it on. And that masculine strength, if you will, is a God-given gift to the world. But we do it for the purpose of entrustment, so that the feminine gift and genius can flourish, right? So that our physical strength, right? Men are in general 50% more brute strength than women. Not every single one of us. Some of us are stronger, but the sign of masculine is about strength. But there's also a moral strength of enduring and the perseverance, another virtue, in the good and fighting for it. And then that knowing how to, the good to choose and the good and to willing that good to others. This is so human. In fact, that's what virtue is. Virtute, right? Vir, a man or human. It's the human manly strength when we embrace these virtues. But that physical strength is also ordered for the protection and for providing of others, right? Obviously for a husband to his wife when you enter into marriage, but it's more broad. In fact, the greatest love that we're told in scriptures is for the protection of widows and orphans. And that's a category of people that are utterly dependent on that protection of others because they can't protect themselves. And we're not just in scriptural times, but in all times. So that means we need a reverence for God, a reverence for woman, a reverence for the child, ours or others, and a reverence for all of creation. Because from Adam, our first father, all the way down, we've taken on this role of a priesthood, if you will, from our baptism in our case, to be the steward in God's place, who's the owner of the vineyard, to everyone else, to woman, to the child, and to all of creation. And then to have that power to will the good, as I said earlier, to make that communion possible. And that mediation with God, as I said, is a priesthood, but it requires us to know what is good, because you can't do what you don't know, to know what's true, and the higher values and sort of the levels and the variations of what's true, higher truths, and to serve the highest truth that we can. And then to experience enough good that it overflows from us to the others. We're talking about virtues, and there's a manly strength to these human virtues. You'll hear phrases like being watchmen on the wall from the Old Testament. You hear phrases from being into the breach, right? There's even a great document that I highly recommend from the Diocese of Phoenix, Arizona, right? Into the breach. Or, we speak of in some of my own ministry, be men of mercy, to be stewards of the garden. These are all like Christian, biblical, Catholic exhortations for everything that I'm talking about here. You have been given a unique power from God that's part of this great gift of masculine reality. And that masculine reality is about initiating God's love as communion into the visible reality of the world. So that's what I wish on you. That's what I wish for you. And that's what the world needs, because you can't fake it, you can't replace it, and you can't have anyone else stand in the breach for you. That's plenty for now. Remember, Catholic Match is here to help you to be more successful in your search to find your forever love. So for here, drop us comments, requests for topics you want me to cover in future episodes. And of course, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to be alerted for new videos. All right, God love you. Talk to you soon.